Welcome to Let's Make Some Enemies with me, Volatility, Episode 1. This has been a long time coming. I've always been vocal about my distaste of the companies behind Marvel Contest of Champions due to their anti-player decision-making, fueled mostly by greed, and their overall way of handling most things. Those sentiments have remained consistent, though on the back burner of what I try to do with my channel. But what's taken place over the last month or so has brought things to a boil, and I'm ready to talk about it. I have a lot to say, so I need to split it into sections. I'm going to start with their newer approach to champion design. For those who don't want to listen to however many minutes of info dumping mixed with here's the very quick summary of the problem. In essence, let's make an unfair defender and sell that, because competitive players will want an edge in game modes like Battlegrounds and Alliance War immediately, and then later on we can put them in future content so it'll also be harder for the non-competitive players. Great. Now, let's make that defender's perfect offensive counter and sell that, because both competitive and non-competitive players now need some way to deal with these BS defenders in all forms of content. If you don't want to buy them, then have fun struggling, you broke loser. Nice. If you're interested in hearing more about the issue, then stick around because I got what you want. Deal? Deal. There is one thing I will address though before going any further, because I know that otherwise I'll be getting a good chunk of comments about it. Why should anyone listen to me? What if I don't know what I'm talking about? To anyone who's unfamiliar with me, it may seem like I'm just complaining because I can't keep up and that I just need to get good. But I'm not the part of the player base that struggles most with this. I just happen to not be selfish, and I can recognize just how detrimental this is for the remaining 95% of the player base if these changes are tricky for me. But again, who the hell am I? Volatility, enchanté. I've been playing this game at a high level for a very long time. I play this game too much. For example, I did the Dimensional Beings Necro Carina challenge in 2 revives. Live. And something that actually put me on the radar was when I did a new account challenge for my channel. And less than a week in, I got falsely banned because I progressed so fast, the system thought I was cheating. There's more, but I'll leave it at that. Just be aware that I have an experienced, educated, and relevant opinion on the matter. Anyways, okay, let's go. Origins. The game mode that changed it all. Battlegrounds. This clearly began with the success of Battlegrounds. The game mode itself was a great idea, and in my opinion, a necessary addition. People were previously only ranking up defenders for war, and possibly prestige, which, don't worry, prestige is getting its own dedicated section in a future video of this series. So yeah, for war or prestige, and those champions were otherwise left untouched to rot in their rosters. We needed a reason to have a well-rounded account with various genres of champions ranked up and put to use, rather than just a sea of attackers. Thus, Battlegrounds. With the rise of the game mode came the rise of players who actively wanted defensive champions to trip up their opponents. Players demanded, and so Kabam supplied. In theory, this isn't an issue at all. But they simply went way too far, and it keeps getting worse by the month. I'm going to tell you when, how, and why this is even an issue. The champion who changed it all. Photon. These last couple of years, we've had a serious, growing problem with how defenders are being designed. They've become simply unfair. And it's all because of Photon and her growth mode. She came out in August of 2023 and started the trend of shutting off your masteries. The concept of this thing that you're supposed to be able to do, yeah, it just doesn't work here, actually goes back to Penny Parker. Even further back to Domino, who's still a massive pain in the ass to this day. Domino does indeed shut off your dexterity when you're unlucky, and I'd argue that the stupid, unavoidable damage of her crit failure falls under the category of unfair as well. But I digress. With Penny Parker, you couldn't prevent her auto-block under any means, even if you were using a champion that's meant to bypass auto-block. She just doesn't care. I'm still auto-blocking anyways. Then they released champions with the all-new Undermine buff, which just so happens to be the one thing that shuts her down. What a coincidence! Gotta catch 'em all, I guess. While still cheap in nature, I think we can all agree that getting a defender who wins even when they should lose once every few years isn't the worst thing in the world. It's manageable. Photon went too far though, and I would argue single-handedly changed how Kabam designs defenders, mainly in terms of what they know they can get away with. To clarify what exactly they got away with, Photon by default shuts off your willpower, which is a direct middle finger to those who run recoil masteries. Then when she enters her signature gross mode, she shuts off your dexterity mastery against her special attacks, which happens to be a huge issue because neither of her special attacks can be outranged, And they're unblockable! You also get punished for stunning her, despite parry being a core component of the game. But you do need to parry the last hit of her special one while she's in gross mode, or you get punished there too. You've designed a boss fight within a champion's base kit. Why this is a problem? The company ate my masteries! And we should have fought back. The problem with defenders removing your masteries. Photon should have had mountains more backlash due to her shutting down your masteries. I believe they actually tried to justify having her turn off your willpower, but it made about as much sense as, I kicked you in the balls because I love you. Kabam really likes doing that, don't they? Making a decision that unequivocally hurts us, then saying it's actually to our benefit. Classy. In my opinion, a defender removing your masteries is not something that should be on the table ever. Nodes that do it are one thing. An attacker altering the mechanics of your own masteries so they're more compatible with their kit is completely fine. But a defender removing your masteries is another thing. And that thing is not okay. Masteries are an essential part of the game that cannot be ignored. You can't play the game properly if you don't have parry or dexterity. Regarding nodes, a fight can be designed with, say, removing your dex in mind. And it's not as unfair because the lack of dexterity is factored into the rest of the nodes and what defenders they choose to use. Besides, a node is restricted to the piece of content it's in. Players cannot choose what nodes they face in content, or what nodes they force enemy players to deal with. And unlike with nodes, players can and absolutely do choose what defenders someone else is going to have to deal with. Defenders shutting down masteries in unrelated contexts, with additional nodes that may require the use of those masteries, is just ridiculous. Mastery removal within a defender is the most lazy, uncreative, and unfair way to artificially increase a fight's difficulty. If players made it apparent that, in no uncertain terms, they will not tolerate the way Photon's kit was designed, champions' defensive profiles would likely be a night and day change compared to what they actually are now. It happened after Act 6 with the Act 7 beta. People who played the 7.1 beta were like, absolutely not! So Kabam walked back that approach, and now Act 6 is known as the Dark Age of MCOC story content. Had players not made as big of a stir about it, Act 6 would have likely been the status quo for story content until that same outcry would eventually occur. But with the whole defenders shutting down your masteries thing, Photon didn't get enough flack in order for them to not do it again. So guess what? They did it again, and then kept doing it. And now it's definitely beyond the point of them stopping. The progression and beyond. Exhibit O. Onslaught. It doesn't stop at that, though, of course not. They've proven that they can make defenders unfair in more ways than just interfering with your masteries. Let's look at Exhibit O for Onslaught. Unavoidable damage from his Neuroshock. You can't parry his first hits, so you need to re-parry him to stun him under normal circumstances. But if you parry at all, you get your willpower shut off for the rest of the fight. Now there is no way to heal back some of the Neuroshock damage. When you reach combo intervals of 10, he basically becomes unblockable from his crush debuff for a while unless you knock him down with a special. So now you can't bait heavies to get an opening. Can't parry, can't bait heavies, only intercepting. Too bad his AI sucks. His SP1 will ruin you if you let it touch you at all. You need to go out of your way to practice dexing and punishing his special one because there's no way you're learning that one on the fly. His SP2 is even more deadly. It'll convert all the Neuroshocks that are definitely already on you into extremely potent degenerations if it touches you. If you're thinking, psh, no sweat, I'll just dodge it. Oops, your controls are reversed. It's even more fun when you have the crush debuff on you, because that means his specials will function as unblockable, so you just have to know how to dex it. And you can't outrange his specials either. Nice try. That sounds really fun and interactive, doesn't it? The best part is that Onslaught isn't even the worst anymore. Many people, including myself, would much rather fight him than other nasty defenders like Bullseye, or Serpent, or Enchantress, or Zola, or Spider-Woman, or Dark Phoenix, or Yelena. At least, not without a decent counter. The frequency of these nightmare defenders has skyrocketed over the last couple of years. Given another year and I'm gonna have to ban people's entire Battleground decks rather than a mere 3. 3 is just not enough anymore. Back when Kabam decided that Serpent was a perfectly balanced defender and he would not be getting changed, I saw a video from fellow Canadian Lagacy talking about it. Within that video, there was a comment highlighting almost every piece of defensive utility that Serpent has, and it really put things into perspective. Kabam deems this as a fair base of a defender's kit. Let it be known here and now that Serpent is the most disgusting, unfair champion that has ever been released in this game. I will remind you, this is before any additional nodes have been applied, because nodes are everywhere, and in all relevant game modes, you don't do fights without there being some type of node involved. I said earlier, you've designed a boss fight within a champion's base kit. Pretty much every defender nowadays have nodes built into them, and this is a massive issue. We see it everywhere. Bullseye has bob and weave, but on steroids, and you can never get rid of it. Destroyer has a variant of Mighty Charge. Maestro has Adaptive Power Shield. And this isn't even an existing node, but High Evolutionary absolutely has Combat Deja Vu Auto Block. Look at the icons when you fight them, that is totally a node. Hi, would you like the rat poison or the arsenic? Too many things to manage in a fight. Basically all fights have additional nodes applied to them, so when you take defensive champions that already have half a dozen BS nodes implanted into their very essence, do you know how easy it is for those two sets of nodes to clash? What usually happens is that the fight simply has way too much to manage and no champion can counter everything that's there. You basically have to pick what part of the fight is most important to counter, and then you stomach the rest of it. Battlegrounds deathmatches, and how they kill the spirit of the game. This is extremely troublesome in a game mode like Battlegrounds, where due to the randomness of drafts, you regularly won't draft a champion that counters anything in the fight, and you are quite literally sent to your death. Unwinnable matchups. Some champions' kits, like Serpent's, are so cruelly designed that even without nodes, you can't really beat him without a counter. So then when you pair Serpent with other nodes, then pair that with I can't select the counter I want and need for him, you are doomed to fail. Here's an example of what this looks like. Hercules versus Bullseye. Ooh, I don't have a Bullseye counter. Reroll. Those are even worse. It was my 15th ever live stream that I did over a year ago, and I vividly remember this fight because of how powerless I felt despite playing almost perfectly. Until I gave up, at least. It wasn't an understandable deathmatch like, I used Doom against Human Torch, what happened? Where, in that case, Torch hard counters Doom, so that fight is basically impossible. Hercules just doesn't actively counter Bullseye. Bullseye doesn't counter Hercules either! This should be equivalent to something like Hulkling versus Silver Surfer, where neither champion interacts with each other's kits, they just hit each other until someone dies. Instead, because of a combination of Bullseye being Bullseye and a node that gives him extra power, this is how the fight went. We already know this, but I'm just gonna throw it out there that Hercules is the best 6-star champion in the contest. He's known for being able to brute force anything that doesn't mess with his personal buffs. Hercules is known as a cheat code. And yet, despite that, and despite me playing without error, both within Herc's kit and within navigating around Bullseye's kit, I still got destroyed. I was stunned at just how hopeless of a matchup that was. People who play Battlegrounds are very familiar with fights like these. Kabam, is this fair? Am I just skill issue? Fun and interactive gameplay. Defender-based death matches like the one I just showed kill the spirit of the game. The whole point of the game is strategy, where if you know what you're supposed to do and can execute it properly, you should succeed. You used to be able to get by with most champions, which allowed you to use the characters that you enjoy, rather than needing to lean on particular meta champs. This is no longer the case. Some fights you simply cannot win if you don't have the magic key, which is usually only like a few specific champions. I consider this to be extremely unfair design. You need to do this, but I won't let you. Defender node combos that punish required actions. Moving on from my personal misery, there is a much worse way that a defender's kit and a node can clash, where an objective within a defender can be prevented by the node, and vice versa. That's not even a clash, that's just a full-on fuck you. An example of this that made me very mad is the good old Enchantress on tile 14 in War, the one that gives the defender unstoppable heavies. The whole point of fighting Enchantress is that you need to knock her down, intercept, and punish her heavy in order to remove her spells that will otherwise kill you if you keep them on. But her heavies are unstoppable, so if you try to punish it, you get smacked. You either need to bring a champ who counters unstoppable but doesn't counter Enchantress, a champ who counters Enchantress and you just eat the damage when punishing her heavy, or you have an awakened Silk. Rather limiting, don't you think? Destroyer on Ebb and Flow Intercept is a prick too, by the way. Especially on the node that also has Mighty Charge, so you can't even put Decelerate on him. Stupid furnace-based fuck. There have also been some recent Battlegrounds metas that demonstrate this growing trope. The meta requires that you intercept? Okay, Destroyer, who's unstoppable when dashing forward and is immune to slow. So either use Dust, Cheelith, or don't intercept and deal with the reduced damage, which almost guarantees you lose. And that's if you can even draft Dust or Cheelith. Another meta, the Invade one, where both champions deal way more damage on the block. Oh, okay, so you have to hit the block. Yeah, Red Skull, Arnim Zola, and Serpent when he uses special attacks on you. Serpent special attacks are undexable and deal crazy block damage anyways. Have fun dying. There are many more examples, but I'm trying to not drag this video out any longer than necessary. Yeah. I don't think I possess the vocabulary to adequately express just how much I hate this meta. I probably will find the vocabulary to do so, mainly consisting of the word fuck and whore. Fighting story bosses in Alliance War and Battlegrounds. We're not far off from it. I'll say it again. You've designed a boss fight within a champion's base kit. To illustrate how problematic this is, imagine established boss fights with additional nodes on them. Imagine the 6.2 champion in Battlegrounds. Imagine the 6.4 Grandmaster on the Stunning Reflection, Polka Dot Power node and more. Meanwhile, one of his prompts in his first phase is to parry Ares on the Root Regen node in War. The Abyss Collector! Ugh. And you know what's really sick? As I'm writing this, my mind is coming up with a few champions who could serve as solid counters to these fights. And I bet a lot of hyper-competitive players are doing the same thing and thinking, well, that wouldn't be so bad. I could do it. Brother, do you hear yourself? Do you hear just how desensitized you are to this? Do you recognize that some of these basic champions kits are actually harder when paired with nodes than some of the full-fledged story and Everest bosses? Do you actually think that that's a good thing? That it's healthy for the state of the game? Dude. Hell, even 3 years ago, if you were to bring up the concept of putting boss fights in current competitive content with varying nodes, everyone would be pissing themselves, chewing their fingers off, and performing an exorcism on their phones. But we're just so used to unfair, overwhelming combinations of fight requirements that it doesn't even sound that unmanageable anymore. And you see, that is how bad this issue has gotten. The only actual difference between current defenders and story bosses is that they don't have multiple phases based on missing health. Seriously, think about it. That's it. Everyone gets burned, not just competitive players. I know that within a lot of what I'm talking about, I'm focusing on the most high-level game modes, that being Alliance War and Battlegrounds. If you aren't a competitive player, then you may think that these problems don't really apply to you. That is incorrect. Well, yes, the issue is at its worst the higher up the ladder you go. These defenders are champions that have been released into the contest. Do you really think they're not going to use those douchebags as bosses within other forms of content? Some of the older Nightmare defenders like Onslaught and Photon made it into Epoch. And look at Wheel of Fate. I'd say a good half of the bosses in there were released as gross defensive champions. Enchantress, Arcade, Bullseye, Serpent, Dust, and Deathless Thanos. You think there won't be Everest content with Arnim Zola, Dark Phoenix, Yelena, Spider-Woman, High Evolutionaries, maybe Solvark wedged in there? Really? All endgame players, even the non-competitive ones, are going to have to deal with these defensive plagues in probably most future endgame content that is released. What is currently the tryhards problem will be everyone's problem in time. Are you looking forward to this? We've adapted, and they can tell. Players' skill. Defenders nowadays are an incredible demonstration of power creep, as well as skill creep from the player's side. Kabam has had to make defenders harder as time goes by, because the tryhard section of the player base, which, hi, hello, I am one of those, shamelessly, just keep figuring out how to handle it better and better. Now it's to the point where defenders have to be boss fights that are paired with other unrelated, at times directly incompatible and unwinnable nodes in order for it to trip up the tryhards. Then they still just keep learning that too, like a bunch of freaks. I think the best way to explain it is this. Do you remember when Apocalypse was released and he was seen as a defensive nightmare? He was almost always placed on the boss node in war, and all the tryhards had to master Tiger against him. When's the last time you have thought of using APOC defensively as a trump card to trap your enemy? The only node that really juices him up anymore is the one that makes special attacks unblockable if the defender has a few prowess. Even then, just use champs who remove prowess or can block unblockable specials, because a decent chunk of characters can do that nowadays. A defender that once frightened the entire community is now easy. Defenders have gotten better, the players have gotten better, and defensive champions now counter defenders a lot more directly. Speaking of having a problem, buy our solution. Attackers. I said that they're also making attackers more powerful alongside the defenders. My fellow summoners, the attackers had to get better because of all these BS defenders roaming around. Kabam has followed the tried and true method of create a problem and sell the solution. Except they also sold the problem, so they're sucking us dry twice the normal amount. Thanks, guys. Modern attackers suffer from a few of Vol's cardinal sins, because obviously I'm the sole dictator of what's good and bad in this game. 1. Stuff's too complicated, both attackers and defenders. 2. Attackers mainly function as a pre-existing defender's counter rather than just all-around use. And 3. It's really, really, really obvious what they're doing at this point. Again, making a problem and selling the direct, objectively best solution to an issue that shouldn't even exist in the first place. A Kabam specialty. If I wanted to read that much, I'd have my thumbs on a book instead of a swiping tap mobile video game. Overcomplexity of champion design, buffs, and debuffs. A general issue that's been occurring over the last few years is the ever-increasing complexity of just about everything. This is including, but not limited to, champion design. Not only do the defenders have various pre-existing nodes built into them, alongside having a dozen of individual quirks that you will need to be aware of, otherwise you'll get screwed on a bad matchup, such as hidden immunities, where something meant to counter the defender simply doesn't work because I said so. Yeah, all of that. Both attacker and defender bios are an entire book's worth of reading to simply understand. And I thought I was long-winded. Not to mention the increasing complexity of what you as the player must execute in order to properly play the champion as intended. I'll give them this. They really found a way to make 5 controls as nuanced as humanly possible. Do they really expect the average player to understand all of this? And then not only understand it, but have the will to follow along month to month to study up on each essay of a champion's kit? Most of us just swipe and tap. Again, this applies in so many ways beyond just champions, but this is the champion video, we'll get to it later. That's not to mention the excessive and still growing amount of buffs and debuffs that exist. There really don't need to be this many. It's too many to keep track of. I am highly doubting any non-competitive player can say off the top of their head what things like steady or unsteady, siphon, sunder, or reinforce even do. I doubt they're even aware of the existence of debuffs like smother, hinder, disarm, shrivel, and agility. Everything's just so bloated. Like, why did we need decelerate when slow exists? They do the exact same thing. Oh, it's because they started making champions immune to slow, so they had to make a new mechanic to get around it. The relatively new severe debuffs are debuffs that cannot be purified or cleansed. Damn, I thought that's what passive debuffs were meant for. Guess not. Can any non-competitive players tell me the difference between Enervate and Power Lock? How many true effects even are there in this game? I forget most of them. And of course, the new Fumble debuff, which is yet another mechanic that shuts off your dexterity. In my opinion, this is largely due to forced innovation. Mechanics exist and work just fine, but then new champions and nodes are immune to those. And then they release new champions with new mechanics that do the same thing, but bypass those immunities. And the cycle just keeps on going. Drives me nuts, anyways. I want to kill that guy specifically. No one else. Generalist versus tailored champions. Previously, attackers used to be made to have an advantage against a general series of traits, usually defined by their classes. Tech stuff often counters mutant stuff often counters skill stuff, etc., until we've come full circle. Oftentimes, though, their capabilities extended outside of purely what their class did in order to make each champion unique, as well as give some less obvious favorable matchups as a nice little surprise. At most, they were designed with their class in mind. For example, Warlock pisses all over everyone that has the Willpower Mastery, or Healing, or Power Gain. Doom pisses all over everyone that isn't shock immune or immune to Power Steal. Torch doesn't just piss all over Mystics, he pisses all over any energy damaging champion. Archangel pisses all over everyone who isn't bleed or poison immune. These champions weren't really made with any defenders in mind. They were simply designed to capitalize on certain weaknesses. But nowadays, we've pivoted to a format where new champions are direct, deliberate, and oftentimes the best counters for nightmare defenders that are giving the player base a throbbing migraine. Attackers are essentially being built whilst looking at a defender's kit. And that attacker is going to shut down almost all of the troublesome facets of said defender. Then they release it, and unless you cough up some good coin, you have to wait a rather long time until you have access to that defender's kryptonite. Which, if you do War or Battlegrounds, you are going to be facing that defender on the regular without their one true answer. Usually there will be some pre-existing champs who can technically get the job done, but it's nowhere near as straightforward as if you had just paid for the magic key. Have fun struggling, you broke loser. It also means that you need more champions total to handle what the contest throws at you. Those older, generalist champions I mentioned cover a significant portion of possible fights. Newer champions tend to cover a small chunk of fights that they specialize in, but they do it a bit better. I don't like that that's the new norm. It removes a lot of autonomy over one's account and what champs players want to use rather than have to use. There are still some newer generalist champions here and there, like my big, bald sweetheart Okoye. Did I mention that she's bald? Anyways, yeah. Exceptions exist, but the new format centered around tailored champions is very clear. They're not even hiding it anymore. History of defender and counter releases. In the past, they used to give some plausible deniability that the sole purpose of this new attacker isn't just to shut down a nightmare defender. Let's quickly run through how this has evolved. Funnily enough, before Bullseye became in his own realm of bullshitness, he was known as a direct Photon counter, but it took 5 months of Photon existing for him to come about. Then Patriot's bitch ass came out almost a full year after Photon did, and the only use that asshole was ever meant to have was to be a Photon counter. And even then, he sucked at it, and he still sucks after his buff, but that's besides the point. I just hate Patriot with a blinding rage. Him and Joaquin. Admittedly, they were pretty quick to drop Ironheart after Onslaught. Only 2 months, but he was, and still is, terrorizing the contest, so I don't think anyone minded. It was also before the structure truly became apparent, so it wasn't as offensive. They took more time with Bullseye, with both Negasonic and Mr. Sinister's buff coming out 4 months after Bullseye's release. They let Serpent fester in the contest for 6 months before dropping a solid counter in Shathra, then gave us another 2 months before releasing his Kryptonite, otherwise known as Spiral, in November 2024. Enchantress came in August of 2024. Joaquin Bitch came in February of this year before they, thank God, gave us a usable counter via Spider-Woman in April. I hate Patriot and Joaquin so much. Arnhem Zola came February, then Dark Phoenix came in May, Carolina Dean came in June, and Colobsidian's buff came in August. Wow, what a coincidence that they can all parry non-contact attacks and don't deal the majority of their damage through special attack hits, despite being cosmic champions who are kinda known to do that. Not too subtle. My personal favorite is Dark Phoenix coming out in May, then Nico Minoru coming out the very next month in June. Bringing back a mechanic that we haven't seen since 2019 with Clairvoyant, that just so happens to be the perfect thing to shut her down. She also perfectly counters Deathless Thanos, big surprise. Most recently, we have Yelena Belova, who dropped in May and has a mechanic that can only be countered by 4 champions in the game. 1 is exclusive as a 7-star, 2 came out this year and thus aren't even in the basic pool, and 1 is Onslaught. But hey, we got 2 new Daunted champions within the last month, and Kat Britton's buff in June, but she's still exclusive as a 7-star. What, you don't want more Yelena counters in your deck? The magic keys keep getting more magic. It's gotten real fucking obvious what's going on. In my opinion, it was Negasonic that truly opened our eyes as to what exactly they were doing. She was not only an incredible counter for Bullseye, she completely shut down every single troubling facet of his kit. Passive debuffs for his Purify, makes it so skill champs can't bleed her, so no Bullseye red damage, counters evade, and can continue doing it the more often she gets crit, even on the block. I don't think anyone's even attempting to argue that that was a coincidence. Regarding Serpent, a 7-star rank 1 unduped spiral slices through the Wheel of Fate Serpent like butter, and you don't even have to try. There is not a single other champion in the contest who can do that fight like she does. There are so many examples within champions' kits shutting down defenders, but now they're also tailoring the attacker's animations to shut down defenders. For example, Spider-Woman's Heavy is a series of fast, short hits. She's meant to counter Enchantress, who is infamous for often making you miss when you attempt to punish her heavy in order to remove her heavy spell. Normally, if you try to punish her heavy with your own, and your first hit misses, she slaps you and that's it. Better luck next time. Better luck next time! But with Spider-Woman, you can miss the first 2 hits and still interrupt her heavy because of how fast your own hits are. It doesn't matter if the first 2 miss, cause the third one gets her before Enchantress's hits can connect with you. Spider-Woman was already intended to hard counter Enchantress, so there's not a snowball's chance in hell that that wasn't deliberate. I find that kind of cheap. A solution that shouldn't exist for a problem that also shouldn't exist. I can't wait until they make a champion that's sleep immune, because they just came out with the first Neuroshock immune champion after Onslaught, Jean Grey, and Captain Britain have been causing issues defensively. Outro. Like, guys, can you at least try to hide it? I mean, hell. At this point, I think the company is straight up admitting to the system because we didn't complain enough, so now they think it's okay. This is simply the new format of champion design that we must stomach. It's shameless. We can and should complain. Obviously, they'd only walk it back by making it less obvious rather than actually changing the system, but I think we have enough Nightmare Defenders already to tide us over for the rest of the game's existence. Can you just tone it down a bit? Oh my god. There is much more to dig into with everything that's wrong with this game, but I have definitely done enough today. I will be making a couple more videos of this variety, targeting things like the game's faultiness, company incompetence, company greed, that's a big one, and what all of this means for us as players. I'll humbly ask that if you found this video thought-provoking or somehow useful to please consider sharing it wherever you deem relevant. Things are getting bad, and I feel like it's only fair that I try to make a difference given that I have a platform, even if only to let you know that what you're noticing is actually there and that you're not crazy for feeling like things have changed. I don't want success or money, I just want things to get better so more players can get back to enjoying this game rather than having it suck the life out of us. Thank you very much to those who have made it this far. I'm not done yet. In the meantime, because these do take a while, feel free to catch me in my live streams. And remember, use code VOL in the Summoner's Market on checkout. Yeah, like that isn't a conflict of interest.